Welcome back to episode 2 of this two-part series of EZRA Asks, where I'm with Vijay Pendakur, and we're exploring the question, is there really a formula for high-performing teams? I think we've tackled the formula part of this question, Vijay, with thinking about context and that kind of stuff, and how that plays in, and that there's maybe some ingredients, but a lot of context. It's not a lift and shift thing. But let's keep going and get into more elements of this and see where we end up.
Yes, I'd love to unpack the model.
So let's get into these three factors then. You described them as trust, belonging, and connection. And as I've said before, I've had the privilege of reading your book and watching one of your talks before. And I've heard talk about trust and psychological safety in the same breath. And again, this is where we might geek out and lose a few people, but this idea of psychological safety, right? So some people, organizations are well versed in it. It's a real
hmm
it's a real thing, right? It's got a great evidence base. Amy Edmondson's work on this sort of really spells out how you can measure, how you can build this at a team and individual level. So it's something close to my heart. But
Yeah.
I think a light bulb moment for me hearing you talk recently was how you said psychological safety's kind of just trust, right? Sort of, instead of trying to get people on board, like we were just talking about, talking HR language instead of business language. You helped me think differently about psychological safety as trust. So
Yeah.
I'd love to just hear your take on that and trust and why that's a component of the alchemy of talent.
Yeah. You know, I wouldn't have gotten to this like kind of keen realization that because for me, trained, I have a PhD in social sciences, similar to you. Like, look, the literature is so clear on psychological safety being a linear driver of individual and team performance that my instinct was like, yeah, you bring the factor forward as
Yeah.
psychological safety. And chapter 2 of the book is on psychological safety. But when I'm engaged with the business, which I am in a number of ways, and that's where that operational ground truth is so important. I was at a dinner where I was talking about psychological safety as such a key driver of leading through. I was talking to a leader who was leading through M&A, mergers and
Right.
acquisitions. Right,
Yeah.
M&A are a very particular form of disruption
Mm.
that 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 require leaders to actually often shift the way they lead in order to continue high performing teams, and especially when you're being acquired, right? And that's what was going on in this
Right.
with for this
Yeah.
leader. And this was the CEO that I was talking to, right? And this person was listening to me talk. He's just like, and he cut me off partway through, and he said, "I'm just so tired of having to baby people's emotions at work. We're all adults here. Why can't we focus on getting the work done?"
Mm.
And I was like, huh, one, clearly you're not hearing anything I'm saying because no part of what I said is about babying people's emotions,
Mm.
right? And then I was like, how can I communicate better?
Yeah.
And where I think the signal chain got disrupted was the words psychological safety.
Mm.
First, the word psychological, emotions, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we're still amazingly in 2024, there's stigma around psychology. My wife is a psychotherapist, right? Like there's still stigma and there's been a lot of progress, but there's still leagues to go, right?
Sure.
And then safety. And I think the word safety lands really poorly
Mm.
for some executive level folks because it feels like coddling and it feels
Yeah.
like we're going to put kid gloves on.
Mm.
And so then in driving home from that dinner that night, I was like, what else can I go to? And, the true behavioral science, IO psych people on the call are going to go, trust is actually different. You're right. There's different research. There's subtle nuance and difference here, but as a pragmatist that really just wants to improve team experience and individual experience now, I have a sense of urgency around this. I was like, let me try and just recode with
Mm.
trust. And the minute I started shifting my language into, hey, trust is basically a person's willingness to take the risk of challenge or failure without fear of punishment or shame. I legit just swapped the word
Yeah.
trust for
Yeah. Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
safety
I was
into
gonna
the
say let's
definition.
define both, but you've done it there. Yeah.
And then business leaders are like, oh yeah, of course. No, of course we want that. And trust is actually one of our business values. It's like,
Yeah, right.
okay, let's go. Let's go. So I think the reminder for all of us on the call, whether we're in HR, we lead a team, we're the CFO, the COO, the CTO, it doesn't matter, right? We have to find the language that sits very close to a sense of urgency and the use case for your context. And I find that right now, trust does that work in ways that psychological safety doesn't. So what I say and what you heard me say a couple of weeks ago was know the science of psychological safety and the skills of how to leverage it for your team and use the language of trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I was going to suggest we define psychological safety, and you did, but I bet anyone listening now wouldn't need us to define trust for them. We get it, right? You feel it, but
yeah,
I imagine you've looked at it a bit deeper than that. So I'd love for you to just explain a bit more about trust and how it plays in, and how it can detract from and therefore enhance performance too.
sure. Oh, let me share two thoughts on this because this is like just so near and dear for me. The definition you heard me share a couple of minutes ago on trust, right? The willingness to take the risk of giving critical feedback or potentially sharing a failure without fear of shame or punishment is the most often referenced definition for psychological safety. It comes from Amy Edmondson, who extended research that goes back to the 1960s in IO Psych, and her work is amazing. All the love and credit and respect. One of the missing links I see in organizations is that they take that definition and they try and operationalize it by setting the bar for what trust looks like as, hey, so I want people to be able to kind of take the leap from the high dive. Because if you think about admitting failure to a leader in front of a team, which is the often referenced, moment, that heroic moment, or Jordan, if you're my boss, giving you critical feedback, this is like, oh, I feel very exposed here, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I found in my research is a psychologist named Tim Clark's model of scaffolding towards what he calls challenger safety. Challenger safety is what we've been talking about. Right. And what I love about this is I read it and it immediately made me feel like, oh, I feel so seen. Like when you read behavioral science and you're like, oh, that's my life, that's when you know that there's like some really clean signal, right?
Yeah.
And what he says is there's actually three legs of the stool, right? There's three scaffolds that sit underneath the heroic moment where we give that feedback to our boss, Jordan, or we say, hey, Jordan, I want to let you know I completely bombed, and it's great to go for that, but it's not going to happen without these three other inputs. The first one, do you feel included? And what I love about what the Clark model offers us is a baseline of if you don't feel included, forget about this heroic act, right? Second, do you feel safe to learn? So do you have the opportunity to take on the risk of being a learner? And when I talk about this with business leaders, they're like, what do you mean the risk of being a learner? And I'm like, well, what's inherent in learning something new? Failure? Yeah. So do we create the space for people to take on stretch assignments, learn new skills by doing them wrong along the way, right? And the third leg of the stool is, are you safe to contribute? So do you have voice? The measurement here, if there's any IO Psych folks on the call, right? This is the voice measure, right? Do you feel like you have the ability to contribute to decisions that have a meaningful impact on your work? And what I love about the Clark model is that it actually gives you the chemical DNA of trust. When people are included, able to learn, able to contribute, then you set the stage for the heroic act that all businesses. I literally have never talked to a business leader and shared that heroic level of trust with challenge and failure and had them go, oh no, I don't want that, because everybody knows that that's the thing that'll save their business from a huge red flag moment or actually propel their business into a new level of success. And it's like, yeah, it's actually scaffolded. And then that's from an organizational integrity standpoint, you cannot do an end run and go, well, we're not going to focus on inclusion. We're just going to focus on trust. Your people aren't going to trust you if they don't feel included.
Yeah.
And so first and foremost, when you said do you want to dig in a little bit more, shout out to the Clark model. I don't think it gets enough attention, and that's why I was so excited to highlight it in my book. But secondly, leader skill, right? So like I know we've been talking about concepts, and this has been a very conceptually heavy thing. The book and also the way I engage in, as a keynoter and as a workshop coach is around practical skills. And so the thing is that it's important to know the Amy Edmondson work and the Clark model. Having conceptual awareness allows you to understand what you're going for as a team leader, right? But if you're that person that's like, I've got this team of 5 people, and we're going through it at work, the whole sales strategy has changed in response to big shifts in the marketplace, and we did a riff. And so now my surviving team members are kind of disconnected, kind of disengaged. This new sales strategy is making people feel really overwhelmed. This is what you hear, right, when you're out in the workforce. And it's like, great, let me give you one thing to amplify and one thing to diminish.
Right.
How do we get as simple as do this, not that? And that's what I have both in the book and also what I do a lot of in my workshops and keynotes is like getting it down to here's a volume knob on trust, and here's what you want to turn the volume knob up on, and here's behaviors you want to turn the volume knob down on. And I find that your average team leader goes, great, thanks. All the evidence is amazing. I get it. I have a conceptual framework, but I need you to be that instructor.
Yeah. I love that. What I'm hearing there with that idea of scaffolding is, even when we talk about trust, or if we dare to talk about psychological safety, we describe this outcome, right? This environment where, it's almost utopian. Imagine an environment where everybody felt safe to fail and contribute, but that idea of scaffolding shows the way there, right? It sort of shows the steps. And I mean, you hopefully get to that hero point of being able to jump off, but there's maybe points you can jump off lower down the scaffolding.
That's right. That's right.
To get there. And yeah, you've talked there, which is, usually where we tried to drive these conversations to practical things leaders can do. And I know some of that's in your book, and you're probably not going to want to give it all away today.
No, let's talk about it. I would love to be helpful.
Give us a few of those things at a high level leaders can amplify and turn down to build.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, look, there's endless behavioral nudges, right? So there's no that I don't want to be protective of the IP, right? It's not like let's go back to that example, right? You're a sales leader. You've got a team of 5. Your organization's been through a riff recently, and you've got a completely new sales strategy and roadmap. This is very common when I'm talking to the businesses now. One thing that you're going to want to amplify, to turn up the volume on, to increase trust on your team is transparency. Transparency precedes trust is a 3-word phrase that you can hang on to as a leader, even when you're living through the slow motion earthquake. Why transparent? So what does that mean, right? Transparency means helping your team know what the knowns are and the unknowns are. When there's all kinds of change going on, your team will actually start to suspect that you have a lot more information than they have.
Right.
It's just a part of the way the human brain works. And so for you as a leader, transparency gives you the power to do this. Let's pretend, right, that we're in a Monday morning team meeting. Hey, team, last week I was looking at my notes from a bunch of the one-on-ones I did. And I know that these are 2 questions that seem to be on your minds as a team. The first question, I actually have an answer to. Let me answer it for the group. The second question, I don't have an answer to this question. What is the new compensation model for sales, right? That's, the folks upstairs are going to decide that new comp model. But I want you to know that as soon as I know the new comp model and I'm able to share it with you, I will share it with you. And people go, oh, that's kind of counterintuitive. I mean, aren't I going to diminish my leadership authority when I tell them I don't have the answers? And it's like, no. One, you don't have the answers. So you don't want to build your leadership authority on a house of cards, right? You don't have the answers. So when you assure them that you don't have the answers and you will let them know when you do have the answers, they go, oh, Jordan's not hoarding the information. Okay, I can trust Jordan. So naming the unknowns as a regular ritual of your leadership when you're leading through disruptive change is a key amplifier for trust. It's a very simple thing to do. And then on the diminish side, right, what do you want to do less of or none of if you are trying to increase trust for your team? Decrease intensity. And so this is one that catches people off guard. But a lot of leaders in organizations that I work with have been given some amount of training in the past few years about feedback,
Right.
because the word is out, right? That high performing teams commit to a culture of feedback.
Hmm.
We've got to be giving each other feedback so that we can improve in our work. What what happens under stress, when the leader is under immense stress, is that it's very easy for the feedback to be coupled with a huge adrenaline shot, right? Because your limbic system that
Mm.
manages your fight flight
Yeah,
response
hyper
is actually
pitch.
driving the bus.
Mm.
And so if I need to give you feedback on how the client pitch meeting went last week, Jordan,
Hmm.
and we are under big strain, we've got that riff, we've got the new sales strategy, and I watched you do the pitch meeting and you made a mistake in the middle of the pitch meeting. And if I'm like, I got to do feedback because my organization says high performing teams, want feedback. And if I pull you into my office and I say, Jordan, I mean,
Yeah.
right on slide 6, you got way off your talk track. And I don't even know if the customers are going to buy now, and now you're sitting here like leaned way back, right?
Hmm.
Where are you on trust? Where are you on psychological safety, right?
Hmm.
Because you're worried now about your job. You're
Yeah.
worried about your continuance at this
Sanity.
organization.
Yeah.
That's not the point of feedback. If you need, that's the point of like a pip,
Yeah.
but feedback is about the reality that we all are works in progress and we want to give people clean signals so they can improve.
Hmm.
And so you can do the same thing, Jordan. Hey, look, I really care about your success and the success of this team. On slide 6 last week, I think you got off your talk track. So can we work through it right now? Because how we explain the value proposition of our product is so critical to whether customers want to buy.
Hmm.
I'm giving you the feedback.
Hmm.
I've just taken the intensity.
Yeah.
And under stress, leaders collapse directness with intensity. And they're actually two different things. I can be very direct, but I don't have to be intense.
Hmm.
And that, because intensity actually corrodes trust.
Yeah. So it's the how there, right? You're saying feedback remains. It's the how you deliver it. It's really
Yep.
important when it comes to trust. And yeah, transparency. I can't help but think of train and airplane delays where tell you tell you the reason is for a mechanical fault or a signal failure, and you're just like, I'd rather you just say you don't know and you don't know when the plane's going to take off.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah, there we are. That's to be tackled another day. Um, let's keep going, and let's talk about belonging. Having discussed trust and psychological safety, would it be fair to say, Jay, this idea of belonging, and I'd love you to help lay down a definition for me, but from what I know and understand, belonging is a bit more of a feeling, an outcome, maybe a little bit less tangible than something like trust might be. What would your reaction be to that, and how would you define belonging?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great place to start. And I think it's very real, right? I think when you see, if an HR practitioner or a team leader says to their boss, hey, I really want to invest in team belonging, right? It's like, we're trying to make money here. And that sounds like you want to get everybody together for a drum circle and a trust fall. And that it's because the word is loaded with noise.
Mm.
So again, let's strip it down to parts, tie it to the business ROI, and give people the DNA in a way that makes sense for team action, right? Belonging is not, belonging can be expressed as a feeling. Oh, I went to a new faith community and I felt like I really belonged there. That's
Mm-hmm.
nice. But actually, first and foremost, we have to understand that as Homo sapiens, we are hardwired to need belonging. So if you really dig in on the evolutionary science of how we function, there's plenty of evidence that we actually cannot thrive without belonging.
Yeah.
When we feel a genuine and measurable sense of belonging, there's actually more pleasure chemicals in the brain, oxytocin.
Mm.
There is the ability to not operate out of a threat response and to do higher order cognitive tasks. There's decades of research in high pressure academic performance settings on the relationship between belonging and academic performance. Because when you are trying to tap into like very, very demanding, complex academic thinking, and you're trying to do like multivariate calculus,
Mm-hmm.
you've worked so hard, you're studying, right? But if you feel like no one is like you in this room, and that the professor doesn't understand you, and frankly makes you feel like you shouldn't even be there, it actually decreases your ability to do MV Calc on the test. And people, unless you know the science on this, they'd be like, what? How does your emotional, feeling in the
Affect your
room?
intelligence. Yeah.
There's actually a very, very deeply interconnected web between your sense of belonging and what they call self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to do a task, and then your actual performance outcome. So if you take that logic chain and you bring it into the world of work and you're a team leader, we've actually all, especially if you work with emerging talent or younger talent in the workplace, or if you've ever mentored a college student, you actually see this all the time. You're in a meeting, you're in your office in a comfortable, casual setting, and you're practicing, right, for something they have to do. And they're doing it great. They're doing the task great. And then something happens along the way. And when they actually are on the stage or in the big, spotlight moment, they underperform. And we've seen this, or we've lived this in our lives. And whether it's imposter syndrome or other forms of doubt that get in the way, what's happening is that when your sense of belonging drops, your sense of self-efficacy drops, and your performance outcomes suffer. And so when we reposition belonging as a core human need that's actually tied to our ability to function at our best self, then we actually unlock all of this performance evidence. And we're able to talk about belonging actually first and foremost as a requirement for someone to thrive at work. And when you're thriving, you do the best work of your life. And I think that's like a much better platform for a team leader to build a investment in belonging on.
Yeah.
I can keep going on to sort of definition and skills, but let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I think you've reframed my question basically with an answer. So is it a feeling? Is it somewhat intangible was what I said, but you've said it is a feeling, but it's a fundamental one, not something intangible that we can shy away from. So
that's right. And whenever anything sits at that level of like primordial feeling and need, then it becomes really important to have some vectors to actually think through. Okay, so great. I get it. I'm a team leader. I want my team to have that belongingness. I want them to do great work. I want them to thrive, So what do I do with that? Right? Do I just go for belonging? And it's like, well, actually, let's break it into its components. So one of the things I do in the book is I grab my favorite, really well validated workplace definition of belonging from Coquel, which is a research organization, and they break belonging into 4 components, right? Like almost like periodical elements that ladder up to a belongingness feeling. And they say that when people are seen, connected, proud, and supported, they're able to sustain a strong sense of belonging. And each of those has elements to it. Seen is actually sort of a core inclusion thing, right? Like, do I feel like I matter on this team? Am I listened to? Am I consulted for things that affect the work? When I walk into the room, do people look at me and say hi? If you know anybody in your life that is differently abled and in a wheelchair, one of the things that happens, at least in American culture, and you can tell me about in the UK, but sometimes parents teach their children, oh, don't stare, it's not polite. But this aggregates up to adult behavior where somebody comes into the conference room to work on the team in a wheelchair and everybody looks away. What is it like when you come into the room and everybody looks away? Right. So seen is one of the elements. Connected, deep interconnectedness. We are social animals. We need healthy interactions with our peers and our leader in order to come to that primordial sense of belonging. Proud, when people feel like they understand the bigger why. So pride doesn't have to be like, hey, I truly believe the product that my organization is selling is going to change the world. Sometimes we get to work for organizations like that, not always, right? But you can be proud of the way your team leader leads the team with ethics and morality. You can be proud of the way your company leverages rigorous pay equity reviews and fixes pay equity issues. You can be proud of the why. My team, when we do good work, it actually ladders up to a bigger win for the organization. And this is a technique leaders can use, is connecting the kind of ground level work of the team to the bigger win of the vertical or the whole org. That's actually a way that the leader can foster a sense of belonging because it's tapping into pride. And then finally supported. Do you have a job or do you have a career? And and a career is about the ability to learn and grow and advance. And when people feel that they're actually in some kind of a journey where they feel supported to learn, grow, and advance, they are able to arrive at a stronger sense of belonging. So after we establish that this is a feeling, but it's a primary one in order for you to flourish at work. Then how do we give people the vectors so they know, okay, what levers can I pull? It's been a tough time for my team. We've got this new sales roadmap. We've had the riff, right? People are feeling pretty beat up. I need to invest in belonging. What levers can I pull, knowing that these are the four tools that I've got?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, breaking it down for us to be really practical there in terms of the components, like you say, the DNA or the vectors of something like belonging, which may still seem somewhat more intangible to people than other things we've discussed. But I'm with you. I get it.
Jordan, I was thinking of a follow-up comment if it's okay to make
go
one.
for it.
I just want to make sure I deliver that practical value for a listener, right? That's going, great, I'm bought in. So what do I do?
Yeah.
Right. And here's one of the when I was writing the book and I was digging into the research, what I was looking for is what's the simplest action a team leader can take that hits all four, if possible, of those belonging vectors. And it's an imprecise science, but the closest one I found in terms of a tactic that you can just do and work on and get better at and make a leadership habit so that it doesn't have to be a conscious thing is recognition. Right. And so I have a whole thing on the science of effective recognition in the book, because the word recognition, everybody's like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Actually, when you talk to frontline managers, most of them, if you say, so how do you do recognition? They go, well, here's how I've been recognized, so I'm going to do that. And sort of like parenting, we all got parented. That doesn't mean it's necessarily either the best way, the most effective way, or what you're going to do with your kids. I'm saying as a parent, right? And so so it's important then to reskill. And there's a hyper simple but really proven empirical model for recognition that in the book that leaders can, with low lift, low friction, stand up and do as a recognition ritual with their team, and to foster a lateral culture of recognition where the team are actually, doing this kind of stuff for each other. You see such a fast uptick on belongingness when you create a culture of recognition on the team, and it does not have to involve money. The other thing that I want to share here, especially if there's innovators, that are in the audience, when you are in a 0 to 1 innovation stage, meaning like you're really in that, like we're building new things, we're like pioneering. Everybody in that stage knows that failure is instrumental to innovation. And what you can do is actually use recognition to create a viral culture of celebrating failure so that you destigmatize it on the team. And so there's a ritual, Fantastic Fudge Ups, which I did not invent, I've brought forward. But Fantastic Fudge Ups is like in once a month at our meeting, because this team is taking on so many new builds and new kinds of innovative tasks. We're actually going to have 10 minutes of the meeting for anybody to tell the story of something they tried that didn't work. And what did you learn from it? And one, this is also just fun and interesting, and people can be, sort of self-effacing and laugh together and bond together. But two, it over time, accretively lowers the stigma around risk-taking and failure as a necessary component in innovation.
Back to psychological safety and trust, right? I love that.
Right. It all interlocks, right? I mean, it's these are discrete factors, but they actually, they're catalysts that fit together into a broader alchemy.
Yeah. And just so I get it right, Fantastic Fudge Ups.
Yes. I mean, I think that the real the real title of that is not fudge, but keeping it safe for work. But and you don't have to call it that. You can call it whatever you want, but finding a way to ritualize if you are an innovation focused team, finding a way to ritualize the celebration of small unintended outcomes and what you learn from that is a really fantastic use of recognition to drive both belonging and performance.
Great principle. People can take fudge, use the expletive or whatever else, but
that's right.
I love how you can make it, talking of fudge, sticky. You can get a sticky language, like you said. It's fun, and people do it as a ritual. Thanks again for breaking that down for us. And I couldn't help but notice one of the elements of belonging, and we just talked about helpful overlapped, is connection. And connection again is probably, of the three things we've discussed, it's probably the thing people nod at and say, I understand what connection is. But I mean, we're living in a world that's facing a lot of disruption, polarization, multi-generational workforces. So the sort of all the challenges that bring. Some people, think we're even losing the art of language with I am and emojis and this kind of
Sure.
stuff. So I'd love to hear your take on what connection means in today's world and why it's an essential component of high performing teams.
Whenever we look at factors that are so fundamental that they actually become prosaic or like mundane or boring, that's actually where the magic is, right? So when you say the word connection, everybody's like, yeah, right, humans and connection, and then you go, yeah, but we actually, I mean, the Surgeon General in the United States just named that we have a loneliness epidemic, right? So a couple of things about connection. Just like belonging, it's actually a fundamental human need. We lived for hundreds of thousands of years in small, tightly interconnected tribal communities. And so our brains have evolved to actually be dependent on what modern ONA, organizational network analysis researchers would call high quality connections. High quality connections, it's so sad that we have to have a term for this, but you know, 10,000 years ago, people would have been like, you mean the 100 people that you live, work, sleep, eat, play, and die with? Yeah. And it's like, yeah, so we're actually hardwired to function like that. And in a post-industrial revolution and now sort of, generative AI distributed world, we couldn't be further from that. And so what I do in the book is first ground us right in the behavioral science of the fact that humans need really strong, high quality connections in order to just live. If you look at Marty Seligman's, canonical work on positive psychology, high quality connections are the root of happiness. Happiness is actually the root of workplace performance. You're miserable, you are not doing great work. So it's very easy to build the value chain for a leader to understand that there's a what's in it for me, but also for a business to take this seriously. You layer on top of that the unbelievable disruption to the fabric of work that 2020 was.
Yeah.
There's many businesses that say, yeah, we had some hybrid going all the way back to 2010. We used some platform, and it's like, yeah, yes, there's examples, but you're the outliers on the scatter plots, right? Like for the vast majority of what I would call like the knowledge workforce, it was really still in office most of the time before 2020. And now recent data suggests that in the United States, 80% of the workforce has some form of hybrid. For that to have happened in 4.5 years, Jordan, it's such a horrible word, but because we beat it to death in 2020, it's unprecedented, right? Like the nature of work changed so dramatically in such a short period of time. Humans are not good with paradigm shifts. We're not actually hardwired to be good at paradigm shifts. And so we are actually still existing in an in-person, face-to-face world. Neurochemically, we are, skill set wise, we are. Team leaders, most of the team leaders got their 10,000 hours face-to-face, and now are leading primarily over some sort of virtual platform. And so I don't want to underrate how important it is to actually take something from the prosaic to the ultimate and to the magical and to the important, right? There, out of all of the factors in the book, from friction to trust to belonging to connection, the one that I actually get asked about the most when I'm like in the war room with the C-suite is connection. Because this is what they'll say, Jordan. They'll say, look, especially I work a lot in Silicon Valley, but even for many other organizations too, consumer goods, manufacturing, energy, transportation, they'll say, look, we now have teams in 60 countries. A manager is managing a team on 3 continents. We've got 3 generations on a team, and many of our teams are cross-functional. Even our product teams are cross-functional. We've got marketing and comms people and sales people embedded in a cross-functional team because this is the new mode of delivery. So think about all of that complexity, right? That's there. And when you're a team leader, if you do not have a evidence-based playbook for fostering connection for a group of people that have very little in common, what I hear when I ask leaders who lead those kinds of teams, hey, so what are you doing to actively drive and sustain thick, measurable connection on your team? They're like, well, everybody is really invested in the work. I'm
Mm.
like, sorry, buddy, I got
Mm.
bad news for you. The work isn't enough. If the only thing you share is the work, then what you'll see over, especially over time or during periods of downturn, disruption, volatility, is
Mm.
actually really quick movement towards lack of cohesion. And this starts to show up with increasing number of sick days, increasing intent to leave scores on the team, decreased engagement and net promoter scores. These are like real threats to team effectiveness and
Yeah.
leader success. So
Mm.
there's that what's in it for me. A highly connected team is resilient in the face of change and
Mm.
continues to do amazing work. So what do we got? And then, so it sort of leads you sort of naturally into, so what do we do? And I can talk about that if you think that would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
interesting to your viewers.
I'd love to hear that, and I'd I just think of people who, because you get people who love to go to work and connect with people, right? Like you in a networking room, dancing around, getting to know people.
Yeah.
You get people who sometimes think work isn't the place where I make friends. I have ample connections outside of work, so maybe, yeah, if you could give us that practical advice, but maybe angle it a little bit more towards
Yeah.
that person, or perhaps the person who's managing or leading that person.
Totally. I love this. I wasn't prepared for this, but this is so good, right? Because I think it actually captures what we're missing in the dialogue right now. I think when we talk about connection and we go to a reductive archetype, me, and then I was not built for 2020, and there were people who were like, I was waiting for this moment, right? I do not get energy from
Yeah,
going into the
yeah.
office and having to have 100 micro conversations all day long. I actually do much better focused work at home and all this stuff. And so I get it, right? There's introvert, extrovert, however ways you want to splice this. The important thing to understand is that connection is not only that kind of interconnectedness. The other kind of interconnectedness, and where I really dig in the book, is on the science of mutuality.
Mm.
And so there's numerous on ramps to measurable connection for a team. One is commonality. Jordan, if you and me, it sounds like we share a few things in common already, right?
Yeah.
So if you and me decided to take a road trip around the UK together, we'd have a lot to talk about, and it could be more probable that we would become friends because we have a lot in common. And if you think about your good friends in your life, you have something in common, right? And commonality is the fastest on ramp for connection.
Mm-hmm.
And team leaders increasingly cannot rely on that because of distributed work and global teams and all of these kinds of generational, 3 generations, 4 generations at work at the same time, all of that stuff. So what else do we have? And mutuality is a way to achieve connection that isn't about the kind of networking vibes that we started this conversation talking about with the sort of playful and energetic conversations. Mutuality is the science of reciprocal vulnerability and trust. And so what that means is, yes, we share the work. We all have to get this work done. But how we go about getting the work done can actually be a driver for connection.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are on one of those cross-functional, globally distributed teams, and we are properly supported as team members, for me to go to you, Jordan, and say, Jordan, I'm on deadline here, but this weekend my daughter had an ear infection and I wasn't able to get any work done, and I'm behind on my deck. And the parts that are missing are things that I've heard from other team members you're really good at. Now I've gone to you and I have like opened
You've
up,
opened up, yeah.
I've taken the armor off.
Mm.
I had a problem at home, I'm behind. And if you go, oh, sucks to be you, Vijay, we're done, right? I mean, the work alone is not going to get us the connection. But what you have the opportunity to do there is to say, hey, thanks for coming to me and trusting me with that. Yes, I totally know how to do those parts. Why don't I, let me put in a little extra calories on this and help pick up parts 6 and 7, and we'll get you back on track by Wednesday.
Mm.
What do I feel to you now?
Yeah.
Wow, I gave you vulnerability and you gave me back trust.
Yeah.
And that's a micro instance. So that's one turn of the flywheel. But if you and me work on a team and we have many moments like that, because the stage and the conditions and the leader behavior is set for mutuality, what we get, and ONA researchers or organizational network analysis researchers are able to measure, is that you and me are able to achieve a high level of connection without it being like, hey Jordan, do you like the
Tell me
pumpkin
about
spice
this.
latte or the chai latte more? You know what I mean? Like maybe we never have that
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
But the work and the way we approach the work actually turns the flywheel
yeah.
of connection. And that connection keeps us resilient and doing the best work of our lives, even when we're faced with constant
Mhm,
disruption.
mhm,
That's what I really unpack in chapter 4 of the book, and
mhm.
to create that ROI for the team leader to decide to do this, because it actually, that flywheel doesn't exist and it doesn't spin without the leader getting really involved,
Yeah.
first and foremost by role model vulnerability.
Mm. And I like that the way you framed it in its mutuality. The mutuality can be we both want to get this work done. We both care
Mm-hmm.
about this work. It can start
That's
there,
right. That's right.
but then these ways of connecting and opening up and being vulnerable will inevitably occur, like you said with the example you gave, or something similar to that, and then hopefully that keeps on turning.
I mean, think about the way that organizations actually miss out on the chance to do this. It's less common now, but there used to be some world class, famous organizations. These are top tier consulting firms, is one, and then there's another one that is a top tier technology, Fortune 50 technology firm that used to be famous for having a model where leaders had to rank their team on performance evaluations, end of year performance
Mm-hmm,
evaluations,
mm-hmm.
using a Likert scale, one being you're probably not going to be there any longer, and five being you get really bonused out and
Yeah.
more equity and all that kind of stuff. And they used to use forced distribution.
Mm.
And that means that on a team of five or more, somebody has to be a one on that team.
Yeah.
This used to be a way of incentivizing everybody to work as hard as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But think about what it does to the flywheel of mutuality. If somebody has to be a one, then I go to you, Jordan, and I say, hey, my daughter was sick. Can you help me out? And you go, no,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to end up a one. And you getting behind on this project allows you to be the one that ends up a
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And as draconian and as awful as that sounds, if you talk to a lot of people, they've experienced things like this at work,
Yeah.
where the incentive structures in the organization actually prevent mutuality.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as basic as this model of trust and vulnerability and this reciprocal flywheel sounds, it actually is pretty avant-garde in the world of work, where for 100 years we operated off of this sense of like, well, the more you can create like a Fight Club,
Competitive.
Lord of the
Yeah.
Flies kind of vibe, everybody will do the best work of their lives, and it's
Yeah.
not true.
No.
It's just not true.
No. Yeah. And this is, I think, I said in the intro, this lots of talk about team effectiveness. It's seeing the team as the unit of productivity, as the unit
That's right.
of effectiveness, and if you're all in competition with you, you're not really gonna be that unit, right?
That's right.
So we've explored the three factors. We talked about friction and complexity up front as, I guess, a sort of bedrock, and then these three factors, and you've very helpfully defined them in what, at least to me, and I hope to our listeners, are easy, accessible ways, and talked about practical ways to build them. So I just have a few more questions for you, Vijay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's kind of going back to your CEO example at the start, but I'm picturing I had, it was for another piece of work I was doing, but I had these very words from a HR leader who said, I'm tired, frustrated, overworked, and, to be honest, feeling a bit cynical. How do you get them on board with these factors? Like you need some kind of motivation, right? But where that's lacking, what's worked for you in the past, perhaps with leaders who are feeling like that, to kind of give them that kickstart and get onto this good stuff.
Yeah, that's very real, right? How often have we been at conferences and we see the newest thought leader talk about their hit book, and you're sitting there, you're like, this is really cool. Real talk, I'm not going to do any of this.
Yeah.
Like, because I've got nothing left in the tank, So, the two things I've already mentioned before I actually give like a more tactical example of how I've tried to make this work. The two things I've already mentioned is that I think serve as some point of differentiation here, is having a constant rigorous attention to what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the win for the person who does the change, right? Who changes their behavior has to be unbelievably self-evident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's actually how humans work. And then the second piece is radical simplicity. Less is more, right? And so the book really is built around this, like constantly seeing for you as a team leader, if I do this, my team will be more successful. I will be more successful. The organization will be more successful,
Mm-hmm.
right? And whatever the this is just there's just less there, right? Like try this one thing or try this other thing. That's it. you
Yeah.
know and so those are the two design principles that I feel like are a little bit different than a lot of what's out there in the team effectiveness space. On the other side, implementation, because what you're asking is an implementation question, right? And I am wrapping up a year-long arc right now with a major tech company that's actually being acquired. One of my specialties is M&A,
Okay.
and helping organizations sustain high performance when they're going through M&A processes. And so I'm working with a major tech company, 20,000 employees, that's being acquired by an even larger tech company. And what what I've done is sort of repackage the elements of the model rather than this being like, hey, good to great, alchemy of talent, leading teams to peak performance. It's the same stuff repackaged as leading teams through disruption and uncertainty, right? So again, tying the value proposition to the lived experience. So people immediately responded to like, yeah, I've got more than my fill of disruption and uncertainty, because being acquired is very long deal cycle. There's a lot of uncertainty. People are asking what's in it for me at different levels of the organization. The incentive structures are often very different in M&A based on where you are in the management chain. There's so many things, right, that make this a unique form of disruption. And so in this leading through uncertainty skills-based workshop, I deliver it differently depending on where you sit. And so when I do it for the executive layer, and I've trained every vice president at this organization now, we talk about ways that you actually have the dashboard, right? That you can actually take your vertical, which has thousands of people in it, and invest in belonging or connection or trust in ways that actually drive your business, depending on what your business needs. When I'm down with frontline leaders, of which there's so many in this organization, we focus on things like, how do you respond to team members who are challenging you now in ways that feel pretty intense? And how do you not lower trust because you're getting triggered by their intensity? So it's much more practical, that, right? Same skill sets, just sort of, it's the factor, trust, and the way that the VP layer has access to different levers, and the way that the frontline leader manages trust need to be different. And so, in July, I was out at this company's headquarters and saw a really cool thing happen. In 3 quarters into this arc, I'd done this work with over 1,000 people in the organization at this point, and it was a senior management team group, and I asked the CEO if he would actually model one of the skills, and he stood up and he talked about framing the why. Framing the why is such an important thing that top leaders can do. Ezra just had Simon Sinek sit down with Nick in New York City to talk about the power of why. Leaders, when they're leading through extended periods of disruption, have to be able to stand in front of large groups of people and reconnect them to the why, so that they are galvanized by a renewed sense of purpose. And I asked the CEO if they would be willing to stand up and do this, and they took that act of vulnerability to try it on the spot in front of the senior management team. And this is not a very effusive group in the grand scheme of things. They're not that exuberant. These are serious operators. And he spoke for 2 or 3 minutes and then sat down, and the room burst into applause.
Wow.
And for this kind of a room, that means that something hit beyond the neocortex, right? This wasn't just intellectual. They actually felt something when he did it. And so, this, for me, I share the story to kind of get into delivery, right? Like, it's important to take a model for high performing teams and reskill people in ways that are relevant to where they sit in the management chain and what their scope is. Also, it's important to reshape the value proposition of the skill sets to be very close to the pain or sense of urgency or opportunity of the org. And
Mm.
those are kinds of things that have helped me overcome the fatigue wall that we are all hitting when we
Yeah.
in the behavioral science space right
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and you're taking me back and us full circle just with concepts you explored earlier, right? The context part of it, right? You know that these are the ingredients, but the context is really important. We talked about putting things in real business terms. When you can talk to a CEO, let's put them in, at your level where you are and where each individual is, and how these concepts can be framed for different kinds of people to help them tap into that what's in it for them.
now. Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
a fantastic callback, Jordan.
loads of great callbacks, like you say, and ways this all pieces together. And yeah, it's been really, really fruitful conversation. And I'd love to just sort of flip that last question on its head
Sure.
and sort of finish up here and thinking about, there must be many, many listeners now at this point who are like, I can't wait to get that book. I can't wait to start putting even the things I've learned through this episode into practice. Where would you suggest they start? You mentioned recognition earlier as the most important for belonging, but if you were to encourage them to start somewhere, do one thing, and then to have most impact, and then what do you think
Mhm.
they would see to show that that was working?
Sure. Well, let me break the fourth wall here. I'm reaching down to grab something. I will show people, right? We got to show and not tell. Let me see if I can get this to come into focus. That's the book. So, the book exists, and it is going to be fully available globally on Amazon on December 3rd. And you can go onto Amazon right now and type in The Alchemy of Talent, or you can type in my name, Vijay Pendakur, or you can go to your browser search bar and just put my name, right? And there's plenty of information about the book out there, and I would love it, if you want to grab a copy. That would be amazing. I think
I thought you were going to pause
if
there then and say that's the single best action you could do.
that's the thing you can do, and you just having the book will help your team know. But in terms of an action you can take, let me go back to recognition. I think that this is it's got such a multiplier effect when you are leading through change. So if you are a team leader watching this pod right now and you're leading your team through change, which I think is most people I know, right? Leaning in on recognition is such an important thing. So what can you do? First, in terms of something you can remember, you are the chief celebrator of small wins. That's a persona you can inhabit when you're leading through change. What happens to leaders is that they get battered by change and you start only focusing on the major milestones. And humans need frequent nudges and pats on the back to actually sustain high levels of work through arduous conditions. So you as a team leader, imagine yourself as the chief celebrator of small wins. And the form of celebration you are going to do is frequent and specific and timely recognition. And this is the model in the book. So this means that people need the recognition to happen often. That's why you're the chief celebrator of small wins. They need the praise to be specific. So when you give praise, and actually this is the zero budget way to do this, is actually words of praise, to use a love language, right? The words of praise have to be very specific. So if I say to you, hey, Jordan, I know you've been working really hard. Thanks for the hard work on the things that you do. You're like, do you know the things I do? Like, what was that? Like, that was some hand wavy fake pat on the back. I feel worse about my work now. Right. But if you say, hey, Jordan, look, I know that you stayed up late on Tuesday night and that you really redid the math on our pricing strategy. And I can see tons of value from the report you put together. And I think that we're going to adopt your approach. You're feeling real good right now. That costs you nothing as a team leader. It's easy to do. It's low lift. And then finally, timely. If you stayed up late on Tuesday night, Jordan, and did that thing that I just mentioned, and I wait until the next quarter, right, to do a end of quarter look back, and I go, remember, back in August when Jordan did this thing, you're like, I really could have used the pat on the back close to the time, that I did the work, right? And so the for you as the chief celebrator of small wins, you have a tool here, right? Frequent, specific, and timely recognition of your team will increase belonging, create the conditions for the kind of resilience and high performing outcomes that we're all looking for as team leaders.
Brilliant. I'm adding that to my dictionary of terms I've picked up today. Sosu, chief celebrator of small wins.
I love
It's
it.
a
And
great.
to always give credit where credit's due. In the book, this is a recognition model I did not invent. It's called the carrot principle, and it comes from
Mhm.
two fabulous researchers, Gostick and Elston. So that's, I just always want to make sure that I
Yeah,
shout out the
reference
original
your work,
IP.
show your workings. Absolutely appreciate that as a fellow behavioral scientist. So, Vijay, we came here today to try and answer the question and explore adjacent questions around: is there a formula for creating high-performing teams? We've talked about friction. We've talked about that being a positive factor when harnessed correctly, and diversity being a way of a form of inbuilt friction that we can use to our advantage. And the way we get the most out of that friction, that complexity, is through building trust, belonging, and connection. We've picked up a lot of interesting things along the way, as you've just doubled down on then, this idea of being safe to learn and contribute, and to recognition as being a really key part of things. We talked about meeting people where they are. And I think the thing I'll take away, we almost got out straight at the start, is maybe there is not maybe there is a formula for high performing teams, but we can only give you the ingredients, and we need you to do the extra work, that 80% or 20%, whatever we might say it is, context, to make it work. Would you say that's fair to say where we've landed? And any final thoughts from yourself?
That was a phenomenal summary. I need to bring you on the road with me. I think you can actually do the gig now. So, I'm going to work on growing my hair out, and then you and me actually can just be doppelgangers for each other.
Sounds good. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure connecting today, Jordan, and I'm excited to continue to learn and grow with you and the behavioral science team at EZRA.
Thank you, Vijay. You're, as I said, a great source of knowledge, and I similarly appreciate the time to bounce these wonderful ideas you've put together for you. Pick that last bit up. And thank you, Vijay, for such an engaging conversation. I really value the time to geek out as behavioral scientists, but explore really meaningful, really important topics, and I'm sure all our listeners do too. So for those of you who have watched, who have listened, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch with us on our various platforms. We're on all the major ones. Let us know what you think, and look out for the next episode of EZRA Asks coming soon.